Hello and welcome. This is Miss Smith at the Art Teacher Maven channel on YouTube. This lesson is geared towards first grade students who will be exploring the picture plane and foreground, middle ground, background. Before we begin the video about how to bring this lesson to your students, you're going to collect a few items. You're going to need paper, any kind of paper that you have, even paper on its way to the recycling bin is fine. Printer paper is fine. Whatever type of paper that you have. You're going to need pencil, something to draw or color with. It could be paint. Every household has different art supplies, so whatever you have in your home, if you have water-based markers, if you have colored pencils, if you have crayons, whatever supplies that you have, you're going to bring them to the table before we begin the lesson talking about foreground, middle ground, and background in a picture plane in the 3D. So once you have collected those items, you also need a pair of scissors. Once you've collected those items, you can come back to the video and be ready to start with us from the next point on in the video. You'll see my hands working and you'll be able to do the project along with me and learn a little bit more about creating space in your artwork. I'm excited to see you back in a minute. Welcome back. You are ready to continue learning about foreground, middle ground, and background in this fun pop-up version of the lesson. So we had explored last week the picture plane and foreground, middle ground, and background. And we had looked at some pictures of foreground, middle ground, and background that are slightly exaggerated. And I'm going to review foreground, middle ground, background with you now because there are some students that did not catch last week's lesson. So I'm going to review it with you now. So we're going to take this marker and sort of outline the space. You can look through magazines or calendars and see if you can find pictures that represent the picture plane and these layers in the picture that make it look like there is a lot of space. Because there really isn't. This isn't really as far away as it looks because I can touch it. It is an illusion of space. The space is flattened with foreground, middle ground, and background. So this part of the picture is in the foreground. I'm going to switch out my marker. This one's not working. So here is the foreground. These flowers, dandelions in the front of the picture. So front, foreground. Just like forearm, the beginning part of your arm. Then you have the middle part of your arm and then your back, the back of you is like the background. So foreground, middle ground, background, foreground, middle ground, background to help you remember. So the foreground is that frontmost part of the picture. This space here is the middle ground. The middle of the picture, the action that's happening in the middle. And then we have the background. So 3 sections of the picture: foreground, middle ground, background. And we're going to be creating that today in the 3D. Last week you just drew a picture, a landscape with foreground, middle ground, and background. Let's look at this picture. Same thing. We have the flowers up front, these very large, exaggerated flowers with some forced perspective. This is in the foreground, the most front part of the picture. In real life, do you think these flowers are in actuality larger than the windmill? You're right. No, they're just really close to the camera. They're like a zoomed in part of the picture. And then this is in the background, in the next part of the picture plane. So this action, such as the windmill, are in the middle ground, the middle section of the piece of art. Now there could be something outside the picture plane. There could be a house over here, or a dog over here, or an airplane, but it didn't make it into the picture plane, the frame of the picture. So when they were framing the picture and putting something in the camera, everything else didn't make it into that picture plane. So we have foreground, middle ground, and then the background would be anything back here, background. Notice how we also go up the piece of paper. I find that really interesting. Foreground, middle ground, background. It goes back. It's farther away from you as the viewer. So these trees might also be considered in the background since the windmill seems to be in front of them. So the blue sky and the trees are in the background. And we have one more example to look at. And we have, again, this sort of forced perspective of these flowers really close to you, and they're coming at you, and they're larger than life. They look bigger than these trees. If we picked this flower and carried it all the way next to these trees, in actuality, it'd be really small compared to the trees. But it's just the way the picture is taken. We can easily see the foreground, middle ground, and background, and even further. So we're going to take this a step further and sort of, for our hands-on tactile friends that really like to get their hands into their learning, we're going to be creating a little pop-up scene showing the space that we can make with 2D. So this is just some printer paper, but literally any paper that you have will work, or even some cardboard you could use to do this. So the first thing we're going to do is fold our piece of paper in half. Take your piece of paper and fold it in half. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry about it. Just try your best to fold it. I like to crease my fold with an object. You can use your fingernail. You can use a penny, whatever you have. And we're going to make somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just put 2 tick marks. About a little bigger than your fingernail. So just sort of mark that. You don't want it too deep. And we're going to make a little incision with our scissors there. Here are my scissors. And we're just going to cut into the paper just a little bit. And we'll go back to those incisions in just a moment and open it back up. All right. So now we're ready to create the background. We're going to start with the background. And your background could be anything. It could be outer space. It could be an oceanscape. It could be a landscape or a cityscape. Your choice. I'm going to go with outer space. So let's create a little picture of some outer space. So we're going to take a purple crayon and just sort of do some outer space here. So purple. Maybe you want to do another shade of purple. You could mix your colors. So this could be a lighter purple. You can peel your crayons just like you can in the art room. You can peel them here. Well, if they don't belong to you, ask if you can peel and break your crayons first. So just do some purple background. Then I'm going to do some different little stars. Little stars. A little moon. These are some construction paper crayons, so they seem to go over pretty much any other colors or materials you have. I'm a fan of the way the construction paper crayon colors go on. We could have a little small spaceship in the background. I'm going to put some paper under here, just smoothing out my color since my table has a texture to it. So if your table is giving you some funny textures, you could just put a little cushion of other papers behind it, like mine is just a pop-up table. And just making my little spaceship back here in the background. So it's going to be pretty small. This is the back of the picture. And we'll add a little bit of rocket fuel and some flames coming out of the back of my spaceship. And this is just for fun, so you can go to town with that. However you would like. This is a permanent marker, so it has permanent ink. So you have to be careful what you get this on, but it can also draw over other surfaces. So there's my little rocket ship. You don't have to do the same picture Miss Smith is doing. A lot of students think they have to do the same thing I'm doing. You can do whatever you like. You might like dinosaurs, so you might want to do a jungle background, whatever you would like. Now we're going to work on creating the pop-up section of this picture. So this is the background. So we're actually making that back portion. And then remember how we cut that little slit? Do you remember doing that? We're going to pop that little slit forwards and make it like a step. So it's sticking out. And this is where we're going to glue later the mid portion of the picture, the middle ground, the middle action of your picture. So I'm just going to flatten this the opposite way and pop this up. Wonderful. Now, here's the bottom. And we're going to make the foreground, the most front part of our picture. So we're just going to fold this to make a flap of where to glue or tape or however you can adhere to things together will be the foreground, and then the next part of your picture will be the middle ground. So we kind of have this pop-up action going on. So we can actually see these stages of the picture plane. So I'm going to put this to the side just for a moment to work on the next two pieces. So don't forget about this. We're just moving it out of the way, out of our workspace. Keep our workspace nice, clean, and clear. So Miss Smith held her paper portrait style. It was vertical. So I'm going to continue to hold my paper vertically because then it gives me the correct width. So with this one piece of paper, I can get the next two pieces of my outer space picture. So I'm going to do a little planet. Don't ask me which one, but a planet. And you could draw with a pencil first, so you can draw and erase. I am tending to draw with a permanent marker so that it shows up better for you on video. So I'm going to just do a little city in the background here. Or it'll be in the foreground when we glue it on. A little futuristic city. And then you can color it however you would like. I am not going to take the moment to color it right now. And I'm going to just cut it out. I'm going to carefully cut around the pieces. And we're going to be gluing this to that front pop-up that we were talking about just a minute ago. So cut around carefully. You can ask for adult help. Notice how my scissors are staying in the exact same space. I'm just really turning the paper with my helper hand. My left hand is doing most of the work. You can take your time. Miss Smith is going fast just for video's sake, so I don't take up too much of your time. I'm cutting around here, and there's our foreground is going to be this city. So you can see as I'm going to be gluing it together, when you will look at this, this will be the front, and this little city, or the city's in the foreground, and this outer space scene is in the background. And we're going to put one more thing right there on this. We're going to glue it to the front of this little step, so it'll be in the middle ground, as you can see. And you can always make the step larger. How do you make it larger? You just close this back up and just make a slightly deeper incision, just like so. So no worries, no stress. If you're like, well, it's not really big enough or it's not far enough out, you can always come back in here and change that up. Just like so. And don't forget to recrease it. Just wanting to go with my first crease. There we go. Open it back up. Bravo. Good job, friends. And now we're going to take some glue. However you have glue, whether you have a glue sponge, one of Miss Smith's favorites, or a glue stick. Open up your glue stick, roll it up just so you can see it peeking over the top. You don't want it coming out too much because then you're going to get a big glob of glue. And the best way to know where to put the glue is to put it on where you are putting the piece. So I am putting it here, so this is how much glue I need. If I put it all over the city, I'm going to use more glue than I need. So I'm just going to come to the front here and add this on. Beautiful. And you can imagine that I colored it. And now we're going to add the middle ground. Okay. So let's see. Let's go back to that piece of paper that we were working with because we don't want to waste paper. We're going to add the next piece, which is in the middle ground. I'm going to dart with pencil first, and then you can trace it with marker if you like. Because once I draw it with permanent marker, it's permanent ink. It's not going to erase. So we're going to do a little monster guy. I just decided will be kind of popping up over the top here of the city. Any way you like. It doesn't have to be fancy. And you can imagine that I have colored him. You can use tip grip coloring. So just coloring with the tip is going to give you a nice color. You want to watch out for things like peekaboos. Peekaboo is when the paper is peeking out at you and looking up at you. So you want to make sure that you color fully with the tip of the crayon. If you're holding your crayon with a grip like this, caveman grip, you're just going to give your student a smaller, or if you're the student, just grab yourself a smaller crayon and you'll get the correct grip by using that little chunk, a little nugget of crayon. So you can kind of picture that. So I'm not going to spend the time to color mine, but you can imagine that I have colored my monster all the way. And we're going to cut out our little monster friend here. He would look really cool all the way colored in. But just for time's sake, I'm going to cut him out. Again, my left hand is doing all the work. And he is going to be in the middle ground. He's the action of the story of the picture. He's in the middle ground. And he's surrounded by all those great details. The details in the foreground, the details in the background. I'm going to chop that off, get that out of the way, so I'm not dragging it around anymore. Just cut it out. You don't have to do a monster. There could be anything going on in your picture. If you did an oceanscape, it could be a whale or a sailboat. You have to decide as the artist. And we have to decide how tall he is going to be, he or she. Okay. So he's going to be, that's a little too tall. So we're going to cut him a little bit shorter. So he's just kind of peeking over. Just like that. Yes. So we're going to glue on the step. Make sure glue pops out just a little bit. Put glue on the front of the stair. You don't need to put it on the top here. And you can use, like we said at the beginning, you can use markers. You can use crayons. You can use colored pencils. Everybody's house has different art supplies right now. since we cannot be at school together, we have to use what we have. And that could just be colored papers. And you can see, I'm going to lower you guys down so you can see what I see when it would be standing up. It would be the little monster peeking out over the top of the city with the outer space sort of background, sort of like they're on a planet. And this would look so cool when it is, if I had taken the time to finish coloring it. But you get the idea of the foreground, middle ground, and background. Okay, so just to review, the foreground is the front of the picture, the action at the beginning. The middle ground is the middle, where there's action in the middle of the story, whatever's happening in the story of the picture, and the background. And see you back next week for your next art lesson. I hope that you enjoy this, and see you soon. Bye.